we're ending this unit by talking about, well, in some way it's a topic that is very general, although it has some very interesting challenges that we'll be discussing today and exploring through some YouTube videos. This last unit is supposed to be kind of a meta unit on the status of all of these things that we've been discussing. So what role should logic and argumentation and rhetoric play in our lives? You might say that this last topic that we're looking at is one that is fundamental to all those other critiques that we've been looking at. Critiques of rhetoric, critiques of logic, and critiques of argumentation. This one has to do with the nature of information. Do we have the right information? How do we know that? What kind of challenges are we presented with nowadays in this digital age? Well, that's what we're going to be exploring today. It should come as no surprise to you that in order to put forth a good logical argument, in order to move and operate within this reality, you need to have access to information, right? True information. You wouldn't be here unless you had some sort of solid grasp on reality, right? You'd be dead already. You wouldn't be able to work a job unless you had some true and correct information. You wouldn't be able to take a test. You wouldn't be able to drive a car. You wouldn't be able to live. So this access to true and correct information is paramount if we want to live, if we want to convince others of things, if we want to do our jobs well and succeed. But of course, we don't all have the same access to information, do we? We don't have the same access. Perhaps we don't have the skills necessary in order to figure out which sources of information we can trust. But hopefully that's something that you're becoming better at as we've gone through this class. The challenges that we're going to be looking at today didn't used to be so stark and intense. Why? Well, because there just wasn't as much information floating around in the past as there is today. Sure, people had access to books and newspapers and things like that. But with the advent of the internet came, kind of an outpouring of all of these kinds of information. We could talk about news stories. We could talk about memes. We could talk about personal experiences and blogs and video recordings and all of these different things. Tons and tons of information is being uploaded to the internet every day. And we're being blasted with a lot of information every day. When it comes to government messaging, school messaging in your email inbox, advertisements, the stuff that you see on social media, all of this stuff is coming at you and coming at me. Anybody who has access to the internet and who is plugged in every day. So an important question arises. Which information can we trust? Another one. Which information is useful? Which information should we integrate into our lives? This is a very serious problem. Because if we don't have the skills necessary to figure out what is true, or what sources we can trust, or what domains of information we should be paying attention to, how can we organize our lives? How can we say we know anything? These are deep philosophical challenges. And given the digital technology that we have today, and how much of it forms a part of our daily lives, this is a serious question that we need to contend with. To do so, I'm going to play two videos here for you. I'm going to take a break between them, But there are a few people who have been wrestling with these questions. Namely, what are we supposed to do about all this information, and how can we sift through it? Because it has a direct connection to the stuff that I've been trying to teach you in this class, as well as, well, your daily life more generally. So, although these videos are going to be a little bit nerdy, I think if you pay attention, you'll find that they are extremely insightful. Because while some people are wrestling with the questions I just posed to you today, well, at least a few people have seen some of the challenges that we'll be exploring today decades ago. So let's do that. Let's explore at least one person who saw these challenges many years ago through this video, the most profound moment in gaming history. And we'll see what y'all think about it.
Videos on various topics, but by far the most popular form of video I have done centers on video game analysis. What I think made them so popular is that instead of being your usual video game review, I have focused primarily on narratives. Specifically, I have focused on what I believe are the best stories in the video game canon. For 20-odd years, video game narratives have been demonstrating their capacity to confuse, entice, and emotionally manipulate their audience in the most positive of ways. Most recently, in fact, I have been putting forth the argument that video game narratives have demonstrated such sufficient profundity that they sometimes have matched the greatest stories told in other mediums. To continue our collective celebration of our modern-day digital mythology, I would finally like to give full attention to a game which, I would argue, has the most profound moment in gaming history. I refer to the final codec conversation from Metal Gear Solid 2. While I have done
Here, let's do this. Hold on one second. This should allow us to be able to actually see the video. Okay.
As the most profound moment in gaming history, I refer to the final codec conversation from Metal Gear Solid 2. While I have done several videos on Metal Gear Solid 2 in the past, I have never given full analytic attention to this specific moment. The main reason why is because somebody has already done so. My all-time favorite YouTube video is titled The Most Profound Moment in Gaming, MGS2 AI Conversation Analysis. Though it was released almost 9 years ago by its creator, Loco Steve, I pondered for a while how I might do a better job than he did. However, given our current cultural context, I believe I have a few other worthwhile things to contribute. The advent of subjects like fake news, the resurgence of rampant political correctness, and our tendency towards online tribalism has imbued this conversation with a much denser sense of meaning. To those who consider themselves gamers but have never played a Metal Gear Solid game, you are obligated to at least listen to this final conversation. Not only will you be enlightened by its philosophical commentary, but you will be terrified by its implications, as I have been for my entire life.
Ryan, are you receiving? We're still here.
How's that possible? The AI was destroyed.
Only GW.
Who are you?
To begin with, we're not what you'd call human.
You were lost.
Over the past 200 years, a kind of consciousness formed layer by layer in the crucible of the White House. It's not unlike the way life started in the oceans 4 billion years ago. The White House was our primordial soup, a base of evolution. We are formless. We are the very discipline and morality that Americans invoke so often. How can anyone hope to eliminate us? As long as this nation exists, so will we.
Up until the end of the game, the main character, Raiden, believed he was receiving orders from a man named Colonel Roy Campbell, a man who was also Solid Snake's commander throughout Metal Gear Solid 1. At the end of Metal Gear Solid 2, Raiden learned that his colonel was in fact an artificial intelligence, manipulating Raiden to perform its political bidding. The bidding in question refers to the AI's desire to control the human race by controlling the spread of information via the press and the internet. But we'll focus on that more in a moment. During the first part of this conversation, the audience learns how this AI came to be, and surprisingly, it is similar to the way human beings as a species came to be. Unlike the origin of human life in the oceans, the AI's quote-unquote life had its basis in American idealism, hence the AI's referencing of the White House as a symbol. In the mind of the AI, their purpose is to push forward American values, things like freedom, equality, and healthy competition. However, Ryden points out what should be an obvious contradiction in the AI's thought process, that the AI wants to take away those freedoms via censorship.
Cut the crap! If you're immortal, why would you take away individual freedoms and censor the net?
Jack, don't be silly.
Don't you know that our plans have your interests, not ours in mind?
What?
Jack, listen carefully, like a good boy.
Not only are the AI about to argue for the ethics of controlling information, but they are going to do so in a very condescending manner. As we move on, I suggest that you, the listener, pay attention to how the AI demeans writing. Their pomposity is intrinsic to the effectiveness of their future argument.
The mapping of the human genome was completed early this century. As a result, the evolutionary log of the human race lay open to us.
We started with genetic engineering, and in the end, we succeeded in digitizing life itself.
But there are things not covered by genetic information.
What do you mean?
Human memories, ideas, culture, history.
Genes don't contain any record of human history.
Is it something that should not be passed on? Should that information be left at the mercy of nature?
We've always kept records of our lives, through words, pictures, symbols, from tablets to books.
But not all the information was inherited by later generations. A small percentage of the whole was selected and processed, and then passed on. Not unlike genes, really.
That's what history is, Jack.
What the AI is trying to do here is illustrate how genes function similar to how memes function. If genes are, quote, a unit of heredity which is transferred from a parent to offspring and is held to determine some characteristic of the offspring, then a meme is something like an ethic, a fact, or an opinion that later generations inherit. Like genes, memes are also subject to a process called natural selection. If certain organisms are better adapted to their environment than others, then their genes are passed on to the next generation while others have the potential to die off. Similarly, if certain memes seemingly hold enough meaning or logic, then supposedly they survive better than memes that do not. What distinguishes memes from genes is the nature of the selection process. Genes are more or less subject to the amoral discretion of nature, but memes can be analyzed and weeded out via moral discretion. However, the AI will now illustrate how the natural selection of memes bears a unique problem in the internet age compared to the past few centuries.
But in the current digitized world, trivial information is accumulating every second, preserved in all its triteness, never fading, always accessible.
Rumors about petty issues, misinterpretations, slander.
All of this junk data, preserved in an unfiltered state, growing at an alarming rate.
It will only slow down social progress, reduce the rate of evolution.
Prior to the internet age, information was curated. We read about the news in newspapers, watched the news on TV, and it was all funneled to us after passing through a, hopefully, professional body. Granted, there was a greater potential for curators such as journalists, editors, and academics to manipulate information to fit their various political biases, but at least there was some form of selection process going on. In the age of the internet, however, information is released so fast that it is impossible to control the discussion. Instead of listening exclusively to reporters, we are left to our own devices to derive what is valuable, except unlike the curators in the pre-digital age, the general population does not know how to separate the wheat from the chaff. We will focus on small, trivial issues like a celebrity's love life, rather than macro issues, such as the cumulative monetary debt of the Western world. We will only listen to news sources that confirm our pre-existing political leanings and ignore any challenging voices. If it sounds like I'm engaging in apologetics for censorship, I am not. I would never censor information under any circumstances. But what does one do in respect to the destructive influence of human bias? The AI goes on to propose a solution.
Right. You seem to think that our plan is one of censorship.
Are you telling me it's not?
You're being silly. What we propose to do is not to control content, but to create context.
Create
because they are not prone to human error and have inner CPUs with greater processing power than the human brain, they would know how to curate information and present it to the human race in a way that doesn't slow human evolution. Unlike your average political body, which might censor information that is inconvenient to their cause, the AI would simply present information in the most factual way possible so that political bias would not intervene, thus cooling political tensions across the political spectrum. Of course, if something like the AI censorship program came into place, ethical questions would arise regarding whether or not this compromises human freedom, specifically our quote-unquote free will. Ideally, human beings should have the autonomy to make their own decisions, no matter what mistakes may follow. In response, the AI argues why the problems that arise from that freedom supposedly necessitate censorship.
The digital society furthers human flaws and selectively rewards development of convenient half-truths. Just look at the strange juxtapositions of morality around here.
Billions spent on new weapons in order to humanely murder other humans.
Rights of criminals are given more respect than the privacy of their victims.
Although there are people suffering in poverty, huge donations are made to protect endangered species. Everyone grows up being told the same thing.
Be nice to other people.
But beat out the competition.
You're special. Believe in yourself and you will succeed.
But it's obvious from the start that only a few can succeed.
You exercise your right to freedom, and this is the result. All rhetoric to avoid conflict and protect each other from hurt.
Here, the AI illustrates the various ways in which human error corrupts truth. That human error arises from an instinctual drive to protect ourselves emotionally and physically, which truth tends to threaten. For instance, let's say a religious fundamentalist is confronted with various scientific truths that challenge their worldview. Let's say the fundamentalist loses faith when confronted by those truths. What happens psychologically is that because the fundamentalist no longer has a belief system to make sense of the world, they are thrown into a mental pit of confusion and resentment. That loss of structure and certainty is so painful to the ideologue that it seems it would be better to avoid that feeling at all costs. This instinct is endemic to almost all human beings. This is why we separate ourselves into political tribes and won't consider the ethical implications of our positions. For instance, is it right to be pro-choice or pro-life? Instead of considering the validity of either side's argument, the pro-life crowd will chastise the pro-choice crowd as being on par with murderers, and the pro-choice crowd will chastise the pro-life crowd as being misogynist, religious zealots that want to control women. These low-resolution assumptions exacerbate tensions between political parties and can potentially lead to violent conflict. Most people will avoid these difficult conversations to preserve order, but if you ignore them long enough, political positions become cemented, and people will kill each other before they admit that they're wrong about something. The AI then present a future where human bias corrupts the flow of information.
The untested truths spun by different interests continue to churn and accumulate in the sandbox of political correctness and value systems.
Everyone withdraws into their own small gated community, afraid of a larger forum. They stay inside their little ponds, leaking whatever truth suits them into the growing cesspool of society at large.
The different cardinal truths neither clash nor mesh. No one is invalidated, but no one is right.
Not even natural selection can take place here. The world is being engulfed in truth.
And this is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper.
As we saw in the 20th century, whether it is with Hitler's fascism or Stalin and Mao's communism, the ideologically possessed would rather kill millions in the name of their ideology rather than consider the arguments of their political opponents. We see this type of attitude in its nascent stages in the digital age, whether it's calling everybody who disagrees with you a racist, sexist, homophobic Nazi, or a West-hating communist. This attitude is pervasive throughout social media, forums, and comment sections. This type of inflammatory language has further polarized our political climate and has resulted in violent clashes. In the mind of the AI, this is due to the fact that we insulate ourselves by staying inside our little ponds and casting all outsiders and dissidents as bad people. If this continues to happen, who knows what violent, oppressive future might manifest? Unlike the reality of MGS2, where a supposedly benevolent AI can make the hard decisions for us, our reality might become a sort of Orwellian nightmare, which the AI wants to prevent.
We're trying to stop that from happening.
It's our responsibility as rulers, just as in genetics. Unnecessary information and memory must be filtered out to stimulate the evolution of the species.
And you think you're qualified to decide what's necessary and not?
Absolutely. Who else could wade through the sea of garbage people produce, retrieve valuable truths, and even interpret their meaning for later generations?
That's what it means to create context.
I want to remind you all that Metal Gear Solid 2 came out in 2001. This game was warning us about the advent of fake news, misinformation, and half-truths roughly 2 decades before the issue captured our collective attention. Worse yet, not only did the AI describe a potentially dystopian future for both our reality and the reality of the game, but they also made us inadvertently realize that we currently have no constructive solution to the problem. The only tactic available at the moment is for individuals to strengthen their moral compass and call out misinformation where possible. However, given humanity's inherent imperfection, even the best of us are prone to mistakes. Worse yet, instead of bolstering the best among us despite their mistakes, we will feverishly exacerbate the mistakes of our opponents for political gain. We see this quite vividly in what has been aptly termed call-out culture. For instance, it is thanks to this culture that there is no host for the Oscars this year. It is thanks to this culture that people will be fired from their job over a tweet they made 10 years ago. A person might even be fired for a tweet that was taken out of context when said person did nothing wrong whatsoever. Worst of all, it is thanks to this culture that we will elect politicians not based on their ethics or policies, but on how effectively they can punch the other side. And let me reemphasize, we have no solution to this problem. In the reality of Metal Gear Solid 2, however, a hypothetical solution is presented. Because people abuse the responsibility that comes along with freedom of speech and expression, and would rather attack people than their ideas, a system that controls information must be set up, supposedly for our own good. The AI go into more detail regarding the solution as the conversation goes on. However, that analysis will have to be saved for the second part of this video. Thank you.
And understand the importance of the message.
The video presents a number of problems that we are dealing with right now, given the technologies that we have and use. One, it asks us to question the kind of information that we're consuming. What kind of information are you consuming? Are you trying to learn more about the world, or are you watching cute cat videos at night? I know what I'm doing. I'm watching cute cat videos. Is that good? Or is that bad? Okay, so that's the first question. What kind of information are we consuming? 2, is there any curation of this information? Think about all the stuff that gets uploaded to the internet every day. Anybody can upload stuff, right? And almost anybody can view that stuff. So there's that side of it. But I bet you also believe that the information that gets presented to you on the news and on certain websites is heavily curated, right? By whoever's running those platforms. The agencies, the corporations, the companies, whatever. So there's also that side of it. Do you know who those people are? Do you know what they want or the kind of message they are trying to send? So that's another question. Third question is, if we recognize that we have all this information, do you trust your own ability and knowledge to sift through it so you know what's true and holistic? Do you know anything about vaccine technology? No. Do you know anything about economic theory? A lot of people trust themselves to know, what's right and what's true and all this stuff. But look, we're all dealing with limited sets of information, right? And, limited critical thinking skills, even if we do exercise them. So then another question arises. Okay, what are we going to do about this? If fake news is a thing, if there's a bunch of useless information out there, if we're consuming it, if it's not helping us understand the world better, and if we have innate dispositions and instincts to avoid confronting truths that are uncomfortable, that may be contrary to our worldview, what do we do about that? Do we install some sort of group who reigns over the information for us and sorts through it and tells us what to think and believe, or not? How about an artificial intelligence? Should we give AIs the reins and tell us what is true and what is false? What we should be paying attention to and what we shouldn't be? What do you think?
I mean, I think you should be able to, I guess, dissect the information for yourself.
Okay, so you want to give people the freedom and autonomy to consume and evaluate information,
Yeah.
right? Now, what's really interesting about that is I think a lot of people would share that intuition. And we did not have that opportunity in the past. Because the vast majority of the information we did receive came through curated institutions and sources. Like the news media, right? Like journalists, like the church, like our government. But now anybody who has the technology has access to the internet and they can say anything, right? So what we're entering into is perhaps the first time in human history in which there is actually going to be a free market of ideas. Is that good or bad?
I mean, I think there's some ways that it's good, but I think it's, or well, some ways that it's bad. But I also think it's good because, like, at least in my view, people having different ideas and different things, like I guess in the video of the AI, it's like it's slowing down. Like it might be slowing down evolution, but it's definitely sparking, like, actually having, well, I guess kind of having conversations with people, but just like you can't. It forces you to either like buckle down on your ideas and be sure of them, or to change them, because you're hearing so many different opinions, and it's either like it makes you think, like, do I really believe this, or do I think this is false? Like, have I seen enough where I can believe that this is true from what I feel, or I'm not true from what I feel?
Yeah. I mean, we certainly have a lot more freedom now to consume a bunch of this information. I mean, we have the freedom to kind of put out whatever we want, right? We can write whatever we want in our blogs, make whatever YouTube videos that we want, criticizing the world or the government or a policy or whatever it is. But then another question we should be asking ourselves is, just as there are those people and groups out there that are trying to get people to believe things, do you have a good enough understanding of yourself to rely on your own information evaluatory, whatever you want to call it, evaluation capacities? Or are there like instincts and drives and feelings internal to you that cause you to evaluate information in a way that you don't completely understand? What is your self-knowledge like? These are really deep, difficult questions, right? We have not come together and come up with a solution for these problems, right? We're just kind of sleepwalking into whatever situation we're sleepwalking into together. So, I don't know, does anybody have any ideas, propositions for solutions in this age where people are becoming more politically polarized, where You might say propaganda, misinformation, and fake news is at an all-time high.
I was thinking maybe you could make like one internet that's like totally free, and then another internet that's like
Curated?
Curated by an algorithm or AI.
So you like the AI
Well, yeah,
solution,
so
maybe?
you can pick. You can go in the one that everybody can contribute to, and find some ideas, because it's like the creativity that's valued in that one, right? The variety of perspectives, and then you can go into the one that's curated for you, and then kind of check out, do these ideas, map onto reality.
Who would you trust to build that AI?
I don't know. You can have different AIs as well.
Okay, so maybe a few different AIs working. And then the question is, okay, how are they going to be programmed? Who are we going to get to do this? Oh shoot, they better not have perverse incentives, right? Or aims. Otherwise, they're going to code it in a way that is going to, be biased, right? Oh God, that wouldn't be good.
I think we're just like kind of at a point where you can't not have a bias. Like I feel
Okay.
like everyone is so opinionated and everything is so like based off ideas. Like I think it's almost impossible not to be biased in some way. But it's just like how strong is that bias, I guess.
I agree with him, and I think it's kind of like designed to be that way. I think it's almost kind of like designed to, like, even if you think that like you're doing your own information, you're probably finding some kind of like, source that's like confirming your bias anyway.
That's an interesting point. I mean, for those of you who work with computers and you're getting a degree in that, how are these social media platforms set up? And what do the algorithms do?
They curate to your likes so that you stay on the app longer.
And they're curated, yeah, exactly, for more traffic, right? And they'll push you into, well, according to a lot of people, echo chambers, right? And pieces of information that bolster your already held positions.
Yeah, I mean, the only one that isn't really like that, I guess, I would say is probably like Twitter or X. But X is also like a shithole. Sorry, but like it's just like a horrible platform.
Okay. So what we have right now is kind of a mix between
But then, like,
Wild
Instagram,
West
TikTok,
and
or-
curated.
Yeah, like Instagram and TikTok are definitely like curated 100% now.
And if you buy into some of the, more rabbit hole-y views, TikTok looks very different to you depending on where you live.
Yeah,
And
like your For You page is like completely different from mine.
if you're like an American citizen versus
Yeah. And it's like interesting as well, because there are things like, there was this one video I saw, and it was like, it was some girl and she was showing her boyfriend's For You page, and it was like really weird. And then like the next 3 videos, or like out of like the next 10 videos, I got the 3 videos that were shown on that. It was like weird. It's like that, like it's like it somehow affected the algorithm to where I got those videos then. So it's really like weird how it works.
And we don't know exactly how or why they work the way that they do, right? Because we didn't design them. But we are being influenced by them, right? And if it wasn't bad enough that there's just all this information that we have to sift through, you know that there are groups out there on both sides of the political aisle that are trying to influence how you think and vote.
It's also like,
right?
Yeah, it's also like kind of some people have like glass half empty, glass half full. Like you can look at a study and it'll be like let's just say there's 5,000 school shootings, and there are people who look at that and say like gun control is not working, and then there are people who look at that and say, oh, gun control is working. It's like it's just even how you interpret information.
Yeah, how a school shooting is defined, for example. It is a very interesting set of problems that we're dealing with right now related to our digital lives, our online lives. as those questions are kind of floating around, let me just play for you the second half of the video, and then we can have a brief discussion and see how we all feel. Because this is something that deeply disturbs me, and I think a few other people as well.
Continue. Allow me to summarize some main arguments from part one. The Patriot AI argues that in the internet age, the flow of information has become far too complex and grandiose. The natural outcome of this overabundance of information is that human beings, on account of their natural fallibility, are unable to separate factual and valuable information from information that is at best incomplete and at worst filled with outright lies. On account of our tribal instincts, our political biases, our emotional fragility, and flawed intellect, we will potentially embrace information that conforms to our worldview best, rather than information that is true. In the era of fake news, this has undoubtedly been demonstrated as fact, as we build up echo chambers that confirm our political leanings and demonize those who express dissent. In response to the inherent truth of this argument, the AIs propose a frightening solution. Create a system that controls human will and consciousness. A system that compromises a human being's quote-unquote free will to come to their own conclusions. Though such a system is repulsive to myself and hopefully many of you, the AIs will demonstrate how human beings might abuse their freedom so much that such a system might be inevitable. Worse yet, they demonstrate how easily a system could be implemented without protest, as the main character Ryden so clearly proves.
I'll decide for myself what to believe and what to pass on.
But is that even your own idea?
Or something Snake told you.
That's the proof of your incompetence right there. You lack the qualifications to exercise free will.
Never in my life have I heard an insult as cutting and condescending. Put aside just for a second whether or not quote-unquote free will is a valid concept. To say that somebody lacks the qualifications to exercise free will suggests that their personality is entirely constructed by outside forces.
Bless you.
For example, if you believe that abortion is an unethical practice or an ethical practice, did you come to that conclusion yourself? Did you put together a bunch of arguments from opposing sides and decide for yourself what the best answer was? Or did you hear one person's argument and close yourself off to opposing arguments, much like an ideologue tends to do? In regards to Ryden, the AI goes on to demonstrate that he, like billions of people on the planet, tend to embrace ideas and actions not necessarily based on their adherence to truth, but rather based on how effectively they promote a certain way of being. This goes back to Nietzsche's famous criticism of philosophers in Beyond Good and Evil. While philosophers might proclaim a desire for objective truth, they are more than likely trying to justify their worldview and way of life. This is why fake news exists. This is why echo chambers crop up all over the internet, despite the wealth of information available to us that should allow us to live in accordance with truth. It is because living in accordance with truth and developing a sense of free will can be life-threatening, so people choose to embrace falsehoods in order to protect their sanity. Ryden then desperately protests that he is not a product of the mindless masses.
That's not true. I have the right.
Does something like a self exist inside of you?
That which you call self serves as nothing more than a mask to cover your own being.
In this era of ready-made truths, self is just something used to preserve those positive emotions that you occasionally feel.
Another possibility is that self is a concept you conveniently borrowed under the logic that would endow you with some sense of strength.
That's crap.
Is it? Would you prefer that someone else tell you? All right then. Explain it to me.
Jack, you're simply the best, and you got there all by yourself.
Up until this point in the game, Ryden and the player believed that their successes were achieved entirely by their own merit. However, the AI revealed that the entire mission was structured in a way so that Ryden would succeed as long as he obeyed orders. For Ryden to find out that he was not in fact a legendary mercenary, but rather a clueless puppet that helped enslave the world, is bad enough. However, it is when the AI offers the more ideal fiction to Ryden that he is simply the best, that the insult has its greatest effect. Ryden cringes and holds back a scream because he sees the truth inherent in the AI's argument. That argument being that Ryden is not his own person. His actions and emotions are all controlled by a higher power. He's not Ryden. He's not even Jack. He's something else's creation. The AI then go on to show how Ryden's lack of self is endemic to billions of people.
Oh, what happened? Do you feel lost? Why not try a bit of soul searching?
Don't think you'll find anything, though.
Ironic that almost self is something that you yourself fashion. Every time something goes wrong, you turn around and place the blame on something else.
It's not my fault. It's not your fault.
In denial, you simply resort to looking for another, more convenient truth in order to make yourself feel better.
Leaving behind in an instant the so-called truth you once embraced.
Once again, the AI demonstrate how people will gravitate to quote-unquote truths, not because they are based entirely on empirical fact, but because they satisfy the instinctual need for structure and stability. For argument's sake, let's imagine somebody who has spent half their life advocating a belief that the Earth was flat, that the government wants people to believe it is round for territorial reasons. Let's say the flat earther is presented conclusive information that proves the Earth is round. If they accept that they were wrong, that would mean they spent over half their life advocating falsehoods and manipulating impressionable minds. What toll would that realization take upon their soul? If they don't accept that they were wrong, they will accept a more convenient truth to protect their emotional persona. Such a truth might be that the evidence presented to them was doctored, and that the person presenting the information is a government shill. This behavior extends not just to conspiracy theorists, but anybody with a political position. This is the reason why millions of people continue to advocate for political systems despite their proven track record of killing millions of people. This is why people still uphold certain superstitious beliefs despite their scientific invalidity. This behavior is not relegated to a few irrational individuals. It's something that everybody does, regardless of their political position. I do it, and you do it. And worst of all, in a democracy, the emotionally fragile have a say in what is truth, which the AI shall now criticize.
Should someone like that be able to decide what is true?
Should someone like you even have the right to decide?
We are nothing but abuse or freedom.
You don't deserve to be free.
We're not the ones smothering the world. You are.
Because the AIs grew out of the White House's quote-unquote primordial soup, they recognize the inherent value of freedom and the responsibility that comes along with it. In their mind, Ryden and billions like him take all the benefits of freedom without accepting any of the responsibility that comes along with it. Instead of using their freedom to seek out truths that foster the human race, they resort to partisanship and ideology to make sense of the world. Instead of being introspective and considering the potential faults in one's position, they will cast the blame elsewhere. The result of this is stagnation, and soon afterwards, violence. This extends not just to our leaders, but to ourselves.
The individual is supposed to be weak, but far from powerless. A single person has the potential to ruin the world.
And the age of digitized communication has given even more power to the individual. Too much power for an immature species.
Building a legacy involves figuring out what is wanted and what needs to be done for that goal. All this you used to struggle with. Now we think for you.
We are your guardians after all.
You want to control human thought, human behavior?
Of course. Anything can be quantified nowadays.
At this juncture, I feel the need to repeat something I said in the first video. I am not for censorship or controlling information whatsoever. I think the ultimate conclusion that the AIs come to is wrong. Even if they were right, I am certainly not giving up the ability to control my own life and make my own decisions. To put aside their conclusions and consider whether or not their arguments are wrong. Do human beings consume fake news and accept it as true? Do billions of people hold beliefs that are objectively wrong? Can ideologues and fundamentalists negatively influence our societies? If the 20th century is any indication, it only takes one bad idea, and maybe even one bad person, to ruin the world. In the social media age, this ruination becomes all the more likely, as almost anybody can build up a large enough following to influence millions of minds. They don't even need a large following. They could just covertly produce a system like the one the AIs are proposing. And when AI inevitably comes to be, maybe our reality could see its reflection in the reality of Metal Gear Solid 2. For the sake of time and brevity, I will skip over the next few minutes of this conversation. They are basically a retread of what has already been discussed. Before I play the final clip, I wish to summarize what the AI accomplished. They created a scenario where Raiden, and by extension the player, had to obey several different orders from their commanding officer. It did not matter if many of those orders seemed unjustifiable, what mattered to Raiden and the gamer was being able to live out a fantasy as a legendary mercenary. That emotional desire was so strong that it prevented any form of rationality. This emotional desire overcoming rationality is reflective of many different situations in our everyday lives. We see it in our news feeds, on our social media, and even in our own actions. Unlike human beings, AI are not prone to emotion. For this reason, the AIs feel they are the saviors of humankind. They will control thoughts so human beings may live in blissful ignorance, and the AIs no longer have to tolerate mass stupidity. In their victory, the AI mocks Raiden for his various faults.
So you see, you are a perfect representative of the masses we need to protect. This is why we chose you. You accepted the fiction we provided, obeyed our orders, and did everything we were told to. The exercise is a resounding success.
Didn't I tell you the GW was still incomplete? But not anymore, thanks to you.
Your persona, experiences, triumphs, and defeats are nothing but byproducts. The real objective was ensuring that we could generate and manipulate them. It's taken a lot of time and money, but it was well worth it considering the results.
Is this our future? If we have no systemic solution to the problem of fake news, and we continue to drown in overflowing information, what will our society become? This video game, not a book, not a movie, a video game, so eloquently explained the impossibility of this problem roughly 2 decades before it reached public consciousness. The fact that it was all done within this 15-minute conversation makes it truly the most profound moment in gaming history. It is a moment that has haunted me for decades, specifically because of how it makes a pessimistic future seem so certain. I figured that any solution, no matter how ineffective it may seem, would be better than to let Kojima's nightmare come to pass. As I briefly referenced in the first video, there is one thing that can be done. We must rediscover the power that an individual holds. If a single person has the potential to ruin the world, a single person has the potential to save it. I hold no delusions of grandeur for myself, but I know that there is strength in numbers. If enough people wake up to the complex problem of misinformation, half-truths, and fake news, and do everything in their power to live in accordance with fact rather than tribalistic instinct, we will most certainly survive. But even better than that, we will be able to preserve our freedom for the coming generations. The power is in your hands.
We find ourselves in a precarious situation then, because of the digital technologies that we have created and that we use every day. People are going to continue to think and act in order to influence others. You do this too, even if you don't realize it, right? I do this. Certainly we all have our own biases. But I think this presents us with a real problem that we haven't found a solution to yet. If we continue to use the technologies like we have been doing, we're going to become more polarized and separate, ignorant, but arrogant. And so I don't have any solutions, but I hope I've prompted you to start thinking about this stuff, because I think it's really important. It may be in some fundamental and grand but true sense that the fate of our society depends on it, on the flow of information, who has access to it, who does or can control it, etc. So what do you all think? What kind of thoughts are popping up for you? questions, concerns?
Metal Gear franchise makes like 0 cents.
It makes like 0 cents, yeah. I haven't played many of them,
I
but
played 3 and
I do find the video very interesting.
I played 3 and I had more questions than answers after I finished.
The weird set of games, yeah. About the issue, though? Issues? I don't know. What do y'all think? Well, what can even be said? I don't know. Yeah.
What if this video is the AI's version of telling us that this is reality, and they're trying to play it for us, and we're just like ignorant? We're like, no, that's not true.
Yeah. I mean, we don't even know the ways in which we're being nudged and prodded and influenced, do we? I mean, maybe there are already systems like this in place, and we just have no idea. Seems like a possibility. We know that 3-letter agencies, domestic agencies, have been running psychological operations on Americans for decades. That's not even a conspiracy. Just read the CIA declassified documents. Yeah, I don't know. That's scary.
I mean, I don't think that an AI, unless if it was somehow like completely non-biased, which I don't even know if it's possible because as an artificial intelligence, it has the ability to
Yeah.
obviously adopt, biases and prejudices, but like
Sure.
I think even if it were a thing, I think like they kind of told Ryden like you're stupid and there's a lot more stupid people. And I feel like there'd just be a lot of people who wouldn't accept it. Like either just like straight facts, no lies, because they would somehow not see their truth in it.
Yeah? Yeah?
I think they wouldn't see it because the whole thing is tailored to make sure that each individual is like comforted. Like we have all this information that anybody can go out and find some piece of information that's like tailored to their beliefs in like one way or another. And like you like the TikTok thing about like earlier, like the algorithm. Like I can go on Instagram, right? And I can, watch 3 videos. I can see like a car crash, a stupid brain rot video, and then like something else, like whatever. But like literally, like my grandma, who is like older than me, like will have a different algorithm just because of the age that she put in whenever she signed up for Instagram.
Yeah.
Like algorithm is tailored to literally have completely different, like, because it's all tailored to comfort.
Yeah. Yeah, to increase traffic, to increase the time people spend on these platforms. Yeah, and I mean, they're in the business of making money, right? So they'll tailor it however they need to in order to make sure that the stockholders are happy, right?
I think also in a way, and I guess something, I know the AI was obviously the beginning, but I guess something that I missed is like, people look at situations in different ways. Like if they release a story like, 5,000 people died in, some bombing, right? There are people who look at that and they'll be like, oh, it doesn't affect me. And then there are people who will be completely outraged.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's just because of prior circumstances or how we truly feel, but
personality, yeah, previous experiences, values, all that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, like there's so many things that shape you, and unless they could completely control that, which I guess is what they were trying to do, but like there's always going to be different sides to every story.
Yeah, I mean, you could view, if you wanted to get, I don't know, a little bit reductionistic, you could view the entire socialization process as something that's supposed to produce a certain kind of person, right? The education that you're getting here, what you're told by your parents, what the government tells you, what the news tells you. It's all designed to produce a certain kind of person, right? And so I don't think any of us is fully aware of all of those forces and influences that have gone into making us who we are, which makes not only evaluating information difficult, but it makes answering these questions difficult as well, right?
Then it's like, even if you feel that you're different, it's like, how do you know that you are?
Yeah. By all accounts, we're all very similar, probably more than we are different, right? Even though we like to tell ourselves that we're different and special. We still give in to the emotions and instincts that we have. We have similar aims, similar biology. Yeah. So I don't have any solutions. I don't have a lot of good news, I guess. But hopefully this has been interesting. Hopefully it's gotten you thinking about, well, the unique problems that we are facing because of the society that we have built for ourselves. If you can recognize that there are some issues, well, we'll be better equipped to solve them, right? Work together and do something about it. Does anybody have any final questions, comments, concerns? Okay, well then I'll just end by saying, spend less time on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, and spend more time hanging out with your friends in real life and building things and creating. That's my bias. That's my, yeah. Thank you for a wonderful semester. I guess I'll see you around.